Welcome back to Early Childhood Learning Bites. I am your host for the day, Heidi Mendenhall, and we are diving into home language supports. So this is part of our language and literacy series. If you've been with us, you have heard the big 3 things that you can do to support reading as our children get older, and we talked about phonological awareness, comprehension, and home language support. You know that we think about language as a big component of reading, right? That you cannot separate language and literacy. And you know that we are focused on those quick, easy things that you can do, kind of that low-hanging fruit that has a lot of bang for your buck, and you're able to really make a difference when you support your 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, right? So if you spend time in a family childcare, if you spend time in a center setting, if you spend time in an early education classroom like a TK or a kindergarten, these quick tips are ways that you can make a big difference with a little bit of effort or a little bit of change. Okay, so home language. Why is home language so important? Well, it is the basis for which our understanding of the world and how the world works comes, right? So what does home language mean? It means the first language that a child was exposed to and really understood the world with, right? So for example, for my mom, that home language was Spanish. Her first language that her family spoke around her, that her community spoke around her, that the church that she went to spoke around her was Spanish. Her second language was English. So her home language, that first language, was Spanish, right? For other children, that home language might be English, and you're learning in a bilingual program, your second language of Spanish or Hmong, right? And for other children, you might have 2 home languages, right? So if you're exposed to 2 languages in equal amounts, like one parent speaks Russian and one parent speaks English, and the rest of the family also speaks Russian and English, and you're exposed completely to those 2 languages, you might have 2 home languages, right? So why, if we're focused on supporting reading and English, do we want to think about the home language? Well, because as that home language develops, that's the base of understanding, that's the foundation. And if it doesn't continue to develop, when we're trying to develop English reading skills, do you see how there's a gap between my 2 hands? We end up with this gap in knowledge, right? So it's that concept, like as one ship rises, so does the other. And what we know is specific reading skills like vocabulary, for the most part, like phonological awareness, that one's a little bit tricky, like comprehension and the ability to retell and make meaning of, these are skills that transfer from language 1 to language 2, right? So you see this for any of teachers that have had students that come to you maybe in high school, or if you learned a second language when you were in high school, that first language, you're really relying on it, right? So you're learning these new concepts. I'll never forget my Spanish teacher in high school, Miss Palubeski. She would let us act out the story and we'd learn these new vocabulary words in Spanish, but we were hooking those vocabulary words to the English word, right? We were connecting it to our home language. So if you don't have a strong home language base, then you don't have something to hook that to, right? So this is why it's so important to focus on home language. And today we're going to talk about 3 things that you can do whether you speak that home language or not, right? So if you are bilingual in the home language of your children, we of course want you speaking to the child in that home language, right? And we above all else want to support the family to speak to that child in their home language, read to that child in their home language, and continually develop the vocabulary and use of that home language, right? But what do you do if you're not bilingual? What are 3 things that you can do to support home language development and therefore the reading and comprehension and success of your child in English? All right, I'm going to tell you. Number 1, visually show value of that home language in the environment that you support that child. So if you're a family, friend, or neighbor and you are taking care of this child in your home, or you have family child care and you're taking care of this child in your home, what does your home look like? do you see words in the home language of the child that you're supporting, right? So welcome signs, quotes on your wall, right? If you're in a home and you have some really amazing quotes on your wall as art, do you also have quotes in that child's home language, right? And here's a really tricky thing. If you were to Google multilingual signs, right? Most of the time what we see specifically come up first is like the English word, and then underneath it all the really cool other words that are in different languages. But think about that. Does that show value? That actually shows power of English. It doesn't show value because they're not equal. So even one step beyond just having the words of signs on your walls and quotes or welcome signs or labels for your classroom buckets and such, you have to have them the same size. You have to have them equal darkness, equal weight, right? You can't say, oh, one and then the other one's under it really small. Oh, they see it, right? No, what they see is value of one over the other. And what we're doing by just providing this visual representation and value of the home language is saying to that child, your home language is important. We need you to keep speaking it. We need you to keep learning from your family, from your community. We need you to continue working with that home language, right? Because they're going to get that English is important. Everything around them is going to say that. We have to help them value their home language so that they can lift and continue learning it, right? Because motivation matters, okay? So look at your environment, look at your classroom. Where can you add signs? If you already have the signs, take a little bit of a critical eye. Are they the same size? Are they the same space? Are they taking equal space, right? Do they look like they're as pretty? Are they tattered and torn? How can you demonstrate equal value, right? And there's lots of places that we can get support. You could go to your local library, you could ask local family groups, you could ask community outreach organizations, and they might come in and help you by doing the translation of things like the cars and the trucks and the blocks if you're looking for very unique signs that you're having trouble finding them of equal weight and value, right? Okay, that's number one. Number two is about allowing space for small interactions between that child that speaks a language other than English as their home language and either another child that also speaks that language, right? So that you can have time to practice and giving like space so that that's not overwhelmed by English speakers, right? Let that happen in a small space. If you only have one child that speaks a particular home language, create opportunity for them to do dramatic play by themselves. Let them have loose parts so that they can manipulate and be kind of either talking out loud or even just thinking in their home language and allowing that space, right? Because they have the home language inside of them, but we often are limiting how much we're pulling it out of them, if you will, right? So let them play in an area that has low pressure for speaking, maybe an area that provides a peer that they could speak that same home language with, right? And sometimes that means inviting in other volunteers that speak that home language and creating space with that other volunteer as well, right? Okay, so space is really important. And when you think about that space, you want to make sure that it is a place that feels like equal value, right? It's not off in the corner, like, okay, you can go talk that language over there, right? But that it's in your environment, in your classroom. Does it have comfy blankets? Does it have comfy pillows? Is it just as equal a learning space if you're letting them engage with loose parts? Is it on a table that they have equal access, or is it like on the carpet behind the table, right? So making sure that it feels as though this is a comfy space where I would do this activity. I can interact in a one-on-one or a one-on-two if I have peers that speak the home language that I do at home, or an assistant teacher or a volunteer. Or I have space to just go inward and imagine in my language and play in my language, right? Space to go inward is great for all children. We know that. It's great for us as well, right? As teachers and our caregivers, we should have time and space to go inward. But that's a different early learning bites. You can check out our social emotional learning bites if you want more on that. Okay. So number three, use the language when you can, right? If they see it visually, great. They have time to practice it, great. And 3, let them see you, the person they care for, a person of power, a person that they look up to. Use the language when you can, right? If you are bilingual, absolutely support that bilingual development, support that home language development. If you are not, learn. Learn 1 word, learn 2 words, learn a phrase. You will be showing the value of that language and the connection to that language. Now, often we hear, yeah, but what if I'm a bad model? You're not modeling the language. You're not modeling how to use that language in everyday interactions, right? Because yeah, you are going to be kind of a bad model for that. That would be giving them very thin level of development. What you're modeling is value of that language, and you're demonstrating connection for that child, and even more connection for that child's family in your program. You're opening up the door saying you belong here and I want to learn from you, right? So if you just learn a few phrases, you're opening up this space and saying, I can be vulnerable too. You can teach me. And once you do it as the teacher or the childcare provider, other children in your class will begin doing it, right? Other children will begin to learn. My daughter is coming home speaking Russian, right? Because we have a couple new students in our school that speak Russian. And do you know where she's learning the Russian? From the candy wrappers, right? So the little girl is bringing candy from her home, and the teacher is saying, yes, let's bring this in. Let's talk about this. And the teacher was learning the Russian names of the candy, and now the students are learning those names, right? It's so valuable, and it's putting that child up and saying, yes, you have something that we don't know. Please be our teacher, right? And you know what happens when you get lifted up? You become more motivated and able to learn, right? And now we're going to be able to also learn English at a more deep level because I'm continuing to see the value of my home language, and I'm continuing to raise my vocabulary, my understanding, my oral language in my home language, okay? So 3 things, right? First, make it visually valued in your classroom. 2, provide space for small interactions to happen in that home language with an adult or peer. And 3, learn. Learn first so you can teach second. Ask questions, learn small phrases. And if you already know, use that gift and speak to the student and to other students in that home language so that the whole environment can learn to value that home language. If you do that, the home language skills continue to increase, and as they increase, the second language English skills increase, and we produce stronger, more academic readers. Thank you so much for listening to Early Childhood Learning Bites. We hope to see you again soon.